Welcome everyone to Buddha's Center. My name is Jeff Allen. This evening we'll be discussing Bodhicitta, a very, very wonderful topic. That is the actual entrance into the Mahayana. When we look at all of the texts, we see that one becomes a bodhisattva when he or she gets bodhicitta. So one enters the Mahayana, becomes a Mahayanist when one becomes a bodhisattva. So we see how until we have this mind that aspires to become a Buddha for the sake of others, we really aren't able to practice in a complete way that will allow us to become Buddhas. When that mind is missing, all of the things that we practice will come to fruition if we realize emptiness and so forth. But without that mind that aspires to enlightenment, we would only have some of the lesser vehicle realizations. Even if we were able to abandon the afflictive obstructions through the lesser vehicle of the hearers or solitary realizer vehicle, without that bodhicitta, without that entrance to the Mahayana, we would not be able to become Buddhas. So we see how incomplete the result is, if you will, with the missing part of method of bodhicitta. So it's just indispensable. So we'll talk about that more tonight. But I'd just like to get started. So let's just set our motivation. Let's get into a physical posture. Sorry, I'm a little out of breath. I just made full prostrations and sat down and started to talk. So just bear with me for one moment here, just to kind of regain my full breathing abilities. But let's get into the posture that we've spoken about previously, the 7-point Viracon posture that will allow us to get into an intentional physical position. We put our legs into a Vajra posture, ideally, if not into a half Vajra posture, half lotus posture, or just cross-legged or on the floor, whatever we can do within our capacity, that's what is best. But do realize that, if we're visualizing ourselves, we could visualize ourselves in the full lotus, because eventually we will need that posture in order to do some of the higher practices, in order to align the channels and so forth. So if we can't get into this posture fully, let us mentally aspire to be able to do so in the future, and maybe visualize ourselves doing so. If we can't right at this moment, do it physically, we can do it mentally, and then leave those imprints for ourselves to be able to do it physically in the future. So we put our legs into that cross-legged posture as just mentioned, and then we keep our hands one on top of the other, right on the left, in our lap comfortably, with the thumbs touching together. This symbolizes the union of method and wisdom. Keep our back straight like a stack of coins. We don't want it to be kind of bent. A lot of times, a lot of chairs and just in general, we get into a posture that's arched, and we don't want that. We want a very straight posture, stacked like coins. Our shoulders in a very comfortable position, our head slightly tilted downward, our eyes slightly open, pointed at the tip of our nose, our mouth in a comfortable position, with our tongue basically behind our teeth at the roof of our mouth. And that makes for 7 points of a posture there. And then the final point of the posture would be breathing. So when we imagine the breath in either a form or of particles, sometimes it's explained, or lights, or just a feeling, a sensation. So when we inhale, we imagine, we could almost imagine this visualization of seeing the breath go into our nose, or just feeling it go into our nose, or both. We see it go into our nose, in the form of lights and so forth, depending on our level of ability in meditation. Everyone can put their own personal adaptations onto this meditation, whatever will allow you to kind of focus your mind, to get it to a more neutral point from which we can build virtue on, to get it to a more stable place, a fertile ground for building virtuous activities, building virtuous aspirations, and learning things, and getting the wisdom from hearing that we can eventually analyze and then realize directly. So we need to get to a stable place from which we can grow all of those things from. So let's, in this 7-point posture, do a little bit of breathing. And let's imagine the breath coming into our nose and filling up our lungs and diaphragm. And once we get to the top of that breath, as we exhale, we count one. And this is a very good exercise that we can do to gauge how focused our mind is, because we can see how high we can get in our counting before our mind is distracted to another object of observation other than the counting and the breath. So we should be focusing only on the breath and on the counting. Or if you do any additional meditations that you find helpful in addition, like a Tonglen meditation, whatever your level is, feel free to do that. But at a beginner's level, Pabunko Rinpoche, even in the Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand and Kensur Geshe Wandok, so many times advised us to first start with focusing on the breath. So let's focus on that breath in a very even manner, breathing in all the way to the top and then exhaling out, and doing that in a very, very calm fashion, but not so calm like we feel like we're not getting enough breath, but not breathing in so quickly and breathing out that it's almost like we're becoming winded. A lot of times in meditation, you'll see us one advised to take these really quick, deep breaths and quick exhales. And maybe later on in the path, that's something that is taught that, in Tantra, I don't know about, but in this stage, we're really trying to keep this at an even kilter. We're trying to keep that breath coming in the nose very evenly and filling up the lungs and diaphragm very evenly, and then getting to the top and then flowing out very evenly. It's like our practice. We want to keep it like a very gentle stream that's always flowing. Doesn't stop, always flowing, but it's very, very even. So let's meditate on the breath for a little bit here. And then we'll set some motivation and read the introductory prayers and get started right away with teaching on Bodhicitta according to Panchen Sonam Dragpa's general meaning of perfection, the great commentary on Maitreya's Abhisama Alankara, the ornament for clear realization. Let's think about the reason that we're here this evening. We recognize that we have unwanted suffering. We can analyze the various types of suffering that we have to endure, the obvious ones and the subtle ones that Lord Buddha taught. We recognize that all sentient beings, beginning with those closest to us, have those same types of suffering. And we start to wish, beginning with those ones that we find closest to us, that they could be happy and free from suffering. And then we begin to move out further and further to other sentient beings, those neutral to us, that maybe we don't know their names. We walk by them sometimes, we see them, but we don't know who they are. And we think, may they be happy and free from suffering. And then we move on to those beings we consider our enemies, we label our enemies, but we know there's no stability within our friends and enemies in samsara. We've seen those positions change. And when we look at beginningless lives, we know we've had all types of relationships with everyone. And then we wish that our enemies were happy and free from suffering. We start to recognize that the beings that we're thinking about are so high in number that our mind can't even comprehend it. And that's how large the mind that we're trying to create is. This mind that's focused on this immeasurable object, this mind of love and this mind of compassion. And we say, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to bring those sentient beings to happiness free from suffering. And when we're honest with ourselves right now, we know we can't do that. We don't know what all sentient beings need. We look to a protector, we look to a source that could bring all sentient beings to happiness free from suffering, who would know how to do that, who would have the skill set to be able to do that. And when we investigate thoroughly, we arrive at Buddha has that ability. And then because of that attitude that we've created that wants to do something about sentient beings' happiness and wants to do something about their suffering, we recognize that we must become Buddhas for the sake of all sentient beings, in order to fulfill our own needs and all sentient beings' needs. We must become Buddhas. In order to become Buddhas, we must have a wisdom arisen from hearing, analysis or concentration and meditation, which starts from hearing. We know that in order to become a Buddha, we have to accumulate merit. We have to leave imprints that are concordant with the result of Buddhahood, or a Buddha's omniscient consciousness, if you will, concordant with those results, concordant with the Buddha's love and compassion for all sentient beings. If we want to become a being who has those things, we must create the causes for that type of being. If we want to be that being, we have to create the causes that being created in order to become that being, in order to become omniscient, in order to become loving, all loving. The Buddha had to create causes for those two qualities of mind. And it's for that reason that we're here tonight, to create those causes in order to become a Buddha, in order to become a Buddha who has omniscience, who has loving concern for all beings, who abides in cessation, free from defilement, who's able to emanate bodies to superior beings that we can't see in places we can't see, and who's able to emanate to our world and all worlds in order to empty samsara and free sentient beings from suffering. So it's for that reason that we're here tonight, to become that kind of being. So it's for that reason that we recite the Heart Sutra in the following prayers. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination, and at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, dhatu, up to no mind, dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable true complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata om gate gate paragate parasangati bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly of the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Gala juvene jo damba ne guje dojo ngai do dojen rubabo lama yi bujinzi ne zongan rozo la jadze lo gazamara deshana gazamara gazamara. Aga samara dachandara samara yame deyada on gate gate paragate parasangati buddhiso baba pancha sanjigai neme doji she doji me doji shewa doji ragi baji me do me shodanji she dengo yeso kirin don jaje je shewa da me do no be jendan jewa dan don ba jong jin bon zon zon joji jachi de jan den da de le jo. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies and massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Radha Mandala Gamni Radhayami. Zanye Janan Ye Janan La Janju Badu Danye Jazu Ji Dagi Jinye Ji Bezonan Ji Jala Benji Zanye Jubaju Zanye Janan Doji Janan La Janju Badu Danye Jazu Ji Nagi jinye ji bezonan ji jala benji zanje juba jo zanje jadan de die janan la janju badu da nye jazu ji dagi jinye ji bezonan ji jala benji zanje juba jo. May this teaching be heard and understood by all beings in their languages. Okay. So again, welcome everyone to this evening's discussion, teaching on Bodhicitta. So wonderful that we can gather to hear a topic that's so beautiful. It's so rare that we could hear such a thing, right? How many people in the world, right? And how many beings in the world would be able to, this evening, or even this week, this month, this year, hear a teaching on the entrance into the Mahayana, hear a teaching on that which gives rise to the Buddha's omniscient mind. It's just fascinating to think of how we all were able to get here, the dependent origination and the rarity of causes and conditions that were necessary to come together in order for us to meet with a qualified spiritual teacher. We met Kensur Geshe Wanda. How rare was that? We have all of these recorded teachings, and we have all of these years of imprints within our minds of the purest teachings, the purest Mahayana Dharma teachings, and nothing was left out. So I just find it so fortunate that we can go back over this material. We can look at things in a manner, maybe a little bit of a slower manner in some topics, and go over them according to the monastic textbooks because of Rinpoche's kindness. Because he came here like Lord Atisha did to Tibet with a lamp that illuminated the pathway that we needed to follow in order to free ourselves and all sentient beings from suffering. And I just really rejoice in all of the holy beings that have come and presented these pathways to us, and the holy beings we've met with in previous lives who presented these pathways to us that allow us to sit here this evening in the most rarest occasion. And that occasion is an evening where we listen to a teaching on bodhicitta. It's just so rare. So let's get into the text. So Panchen Sonam Dragpa, again, is the textbook writer for Drepung Losaling, the current text that they use. Jayangappi Lodru was the first. And then Panchen Sonam Dragpa's works kind of outweighed Jayangappi Lodru's works in the eyes of Drepung. So they took on Panchen Sonam Dragpa's textbooks. Panchen Sonam Dragpa has so many volumes on Prajnaparamita, volumes on Madhyamika, volumes on Pramanavartika Karika, and so forth. So we find so many volumes of Panchen Sonam Dragpa's works. And Panchen Sonam Dragpa has a very special quality of, as I mentioned before, he was the abbot of all three major monasteries, Ganden, Sera, and Drepung, and was the student of the second Dalai Lama, teacher of the third Dalai Lama. So just a little bit of history. If anything error was said, I apologize. Everyone knows that is not my forte, but just wanted to give you a little bit of a background on the author of the text, Parshin Shitun, the Panchen Sonam Dragpa's text, The General Meaning of Perfection. This text is a commentary on Lord Maitreya's Abhisama Alamkara, which is a commentary on the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. The Abhisama Alamkara nicely shows how the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras are put in an order and understood in a specific order according to specific topics, 70 topics. And there's different ways to enumerate, but 70 topics is one specific enumeration. And this particular text, The General Meaning of Perfection, comments on the Abhisama Alamkara and expands upon it, because the Abhisama Alamkara is extremely encoded, Maitreya's ornament for clear realization. Just trying to read it, you won't be able to pull the meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras out of it without a commentary, unless you're of quite sharp capacity. So Panchen Sonam Dragpa and so many other authors wrote commentaries on this work to get us to be able to understand it better. And this particular section is the section on mind generation, Mahayana mind, awakening of bodhicitta. So again, we have 5 categories: base, cause, nature, divisions, and benefits. So what kind of base is needed? What kind of physical and mental base do you need to get bodhicitta? What would be the cause of bodhicitta? How would you define such a thing, such a bodhicitta? What are the divisions of bodhicitta? And then the benefits. So we've already gone through base. So when we looked at bodhicitta in this particular framework, we divided it into 2 categories: aspiring bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. We learned aspiring bodhicitta is the bodhicitta that wants to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings, has these kind of 2 thoughts: I want to become a Buddha, and the purpose is for sentient beings' sake. So once one generates that in a clear fashion, then and has this realization that doesn't leave, right? It's like day and night. One wants to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. That's what every moment of their thought is kind of pointed at, unless they're in some meditative concentration on something else, right? So I just want to say that in the general stance, the Bodhisattva's mind is always engaged in this idea of wanting to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. Just like when someone gets renunciation, according to Lama Tsongkhapa's 3 principal paths, it's when you day and night you're wanting to get out of cyclic existence, that's when you know you have renunciation. So bodhicitta is very similar. When day and night, right? You not only want to get out of cyclic existence, but you want to get out in the way that is Buddhahood. You're not settling for anything less than that. So you want to definitely emerge into Buddhahood for the sake of sentient beings. So this is something that you day and night wish to do, become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. Rinpoche always said that renunciation was, a wish to get yourself out, and compassion was a wish to get others out, wanting to get others out. We'll move on from there. So you have this base, these various bases of aspirational and engaged bodhicitta. Aspirational bodhicitta, this thought and this desire to become a Buddha, and then engaged bodhicitta, we said, is that thought combined with a vow. Physical base, you can get aspiring bodhicitta. We said any among the 6 realms of cyclic existence. Engaged bodhicitta, physical base for that first arisal. We said really the higher realms of cyclic existence. Panchen Sonam Dragpa states in the general meaning of perfection that, the humans and the form realm beings, desire realm gods, we find have the ability to take a bodhisattva vow and have that new arisal of engaged bodhicitta. And then the mental base, we went over last week. We saw that there, for the aspiring bodhicitta, one needed faith focused on the conqueror. So really this foundation in faith, compassion focused on sentient beings, the perseverance that endures the hardships of a conqueror's child, and then this general faith. So we differentiated the 2 types of faith, because the first one says a faith focused on the conqueror, and then the last one is faith also. Geshe Aga said there are 3 permutations. If it's faith focused on the conqueror, it's faith, but if it's faith, it's not necessarily faith focused on the conqueror. We'll show that which is not faith focused on the conqueror, but faith. You would say faith in compassion, faith in bodhicitta, faith in the hearers, faith in the Dharma jewel. Okay, so these other types of faith that are the conqueror and the conqueror's Dharma, I think are 2 ways that it's placed in the text. That's the differentiations between those types of faith, and then the compassion focused on sentient beings, and this perseverance. So we'll get more into compassion later. So that's the mental base for aspiring bodhicitta. And then engaged bodhicitta, what type of mental base do you need? Well, you need aspiring bodhicitta. So you need to be on the path of accumulation. According to the framework of the five Mahayana paths, when we look at in the Perfection of Wisdom teachings, when one generates the mind that aspires to enlightenment, he or she is on the Mahayana path of accumulation. And there are 3 stages of the Mahayana path of accumulation: small, medium, and great. So he or she is on the small level of the path of accumulation. The only level among those 5 paths that one could lose their bodhicitta. Very rare, but it's possible that one could, find it too hard, or say sentient beings are just too numerous and too naughty. So this bodhisattva on this level could lose it, but probably won't. And then once they take the bodhisattva vow, they move from the path of small path of accumulation to the medium path of accumulation. And at that point, they are engaged bodhisattvas. They have engaged bodhicitta from that point forward. It's said that the path of accumulation, the mental, path of accumulation, that mind that aspires to enlightenment, is the mental base necessary in order to have engaged bodhicitta. So it's obvious that you have to first develop aspiring bodhicitta to then take the bodhisattva vow, because it's only a bodhisattva that can actually receive a bodhisattva vow. We can take a bodhisattva vow if we aren't bodhisattvas, and we have this kind of connection to the bodhisattva vow. It's like a facsimile of it, and by acting as if we got a bodhisattva vow, and we then keep these facsimile of vows, and it leaves these imprints, and it becomes, we become accustomed to being bodhisattvas. And again, when we look at cause and effect, that type of behavior and that type of analysis would be the only thing that could turn us into that type of being, would be becoming familiar with being like that, right? When we look at Gom or meditation, it's familiarization. The way we understand the nature of reality is we become familiar over and over again with what the nature of reality is. So that's what we're doing here. Those are the two bases needed. So now we get into the next category, which is cause. And there's general cause and specific cause. When we look at the first category of general cause, it's cause. I know that sounds strange. Under the category cause, we have three categories: causes, conditions, and powers. It's just how it breaks down in the outline. So anybody who's doing the outline right now, we're going to have cause. Second category is cause, and there's general cause and specific cause. We're going to start with general cause. And general cause has three categories: cause, condition, and power. So general cause, category has 4 points made. So the causes that are generally needed to get aspirational bodhicitta. So all of these points that are going to be made about causes, conditions, and powers are like, what's going to be necessary to create that fertile ground, that ground from which, everything can grow. When we talk about in the Lamrim Chemo, it talks about equanimity being that fertile ground, from which all of the realizations of bodhicitta, love, and compassion can grow. So here, these are the things that are going to be necessary in order for bodhicitta to grow, but not the only things that are necessary for bodhicitta to grow. So many of these things, if you're talking about being under the influence, for instance, of love and compassion, it's assumed that you have all of the realizations that kind of led up to, love and compassion. So you would have renunciation, you would have these realizations, and you would have familiarization with these topics and understandings of these topics. So these aren't the only causes, conditions, and powers necessary, but these are necessary. And when you look at each of these categories, start to think about what would it take to have this category. And you'll find that it's very, 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 very vast. It isn't just this one little line. This line has loaded within it so many pre-steps, right? Let's start a little bit. Let's get into the text, and then we'll talk about some different stuff. So the presentation, it's accepted generally that it comes from the Bodhisattva's Bhumis. Obviously, Buddha Shakyamuni taught everything. But when we look at this particular presentation and we look for quotes and so forth, we find in Asanga's Bodhisattva Bhumis where the presentation is given. And you even find some of the presentation in the early Kadampa writer, Gampopa's Lamrim, the jeweled ornament for liberation. He actually quotes the Bodhisattva Bhumis section that goes over these causes. So you just find from Atisha through these Kadampa lineages all the way to Tsongkhapa, everyone's talking about the same thing. Everyone's talking about the same thing and just polishing it a little more and making it more understandable. and understanding that beings aren't quite as sharp as others. And, beings like me need so many different examples and so many different points and definitions and so forth. And it's just so beautiful that this lineage has been passed down with all of these ornaments on it, ornaments of understanding, and oral traditions and commentaries that are right in our hands. And we have absolutely no excuse not to read, because now they're in English. This isn't information we have to go seek out too far. We have Amazon. We can get things, we can get books, we can get all of these things some way or another. We have the ability to read and understand. And many of you, not myself, have college level education. So I just have a high school diploma. If I'm able to kind of like muddle through this information, right? Others who have higher levels of education don't have any excuse. You've been able to learn information and process it, and even take tests to prove you learned it. And information that isn't any more difficult. I'm sure you took, physics and biology and chemistry. I mean, that's a lot of information. And then we get to Buddhism, we say, these darn divisions, there's so many of them. Why would we have to learn so many things like this, so many dumb things like this? But you were willing to spend so much time learning things and memorizing them that don't really ultimately matter, probably even in your life right now, let alone your future lives. So if you were willing to learn information just for the sake of information, why not be willing to learn a little bit more information about information that could make you never have to suffer again, and make you know how to make everyone that exists not have to suffer again, and make you like a superhero that can go out and rush sentient beings through skillful means to their enlightenments. Not give them your realizations or give some special powers. I always want to say this quote: the Buddhists do not wash away the sins with water, the Buddha said. The Dalai Lama, quoted it again. It's so wonderful. His Holiness is teaching the last 2 days. He gave a teaching on Lama Tsongkhapa's praise of dependent origination, and then gave the 1,000-armed Buddha of compassion initiation to the Tibetan school children, and then the world also at the same time. So, and the teaching he gave to the Tibetan school children on emptiness was pretty thorough. If you look at the first day, I was really, really impressed at the level of detail His Holiness went into about emptiness, as he always does. But just I rejoice, and really I prostrate to the feet of Chenrezig, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. May he really, really stay and abide. He says maybe 10 or 20 more years, he just said. So may he abide for 10 times that, if that's possible, right? Modern science, who knows? Let's get cracking on that. Let's get there's some really quality beings still in this world that would be great if they could live even longer. So wouldn't that be wonderful if we could just have that thought that may there be some way that His Holiness could even live longer, and that the lamas who are in our world, I heard Lama Zopa Rinpoche is sick right now. Please keep him in your prayers. These great masters, these great yogis, these bodhisattvas who change the world by being in it, just by walking in the world, they change it, are leaving. And if we could just make those aspirations that they could just stay as long as possible, it keeps us connected to those teachers. So, so the first cause. So it says in Gampopa's jewel ornament for liberation, it quotes the Bodhisattva Bhumi. So it says so let's just read a little bit for auspicious reasons. When we get to the methods section of Gampopa's jeweled ornament for liberation, and we get into the cultivation of bodhicitta, there's different categories. So we get to number 5. I don't want to go through all the different categories. It'll take too long, and I'm not a scholar of this text. I reference it quite a bit, though, because I find it to be a wonderful text. So the causes for cultivation of bodhicitta are given in the 10 Dharma Sutra. That mind is cultivated through 4 causes: seeing the beneficial effects of bodhicitta, developing devotion for the one thus gone, seeing the suffering of living beings, and the inspiration of a spiritual master. Okay. So that's a quote from the 10 Dharma Sutra. So now the Bodhisattva Bhumis makes it clear, clearer, and then Panchen Sonam Dragpa makes it clear. So the Bodhisattva Bhumi says the four causes are the perfect noble family. The Mahayana family is the first cause of the cultivation. To fully attend the Buddha, Bodhisattvas, and teachers is the second cause for the cultivation of bodhicitta. Cultivating compassion for all sentient beings is the third cause. And having fearlessness towards suffering and hardship that are long, varied, harsh, and without interruption is the fourth cause for the cultivation of bodhicitta. So, it's interesting. You see that point made already in the mental base. That's kind of similar. The mental base necessary for getting aspiring bodhicitta. You need to, have this fearlessness towards hardship. And here it's interesting. It says long, varied, harsh, without interruption. So are you ready for that? So the kind of being that gets this mind has no problem with that, is ready for that, and actually joyfully is ready for that. And that's what's so amazing about what happens to a being as they develop the understanding of cause and effect, and understanding that virtue causes happiness, and that in dependence upon sentient beings, one becomes enlightened. So one finds joy really in anything they're doing for a sentient being, because if it's hard, it just means that the bodhisattvas, in some cases, getting rid of unwanted karma, negative karmas that are ripening on them, or that the bodhisattva is learning to enhance their patience and enhance their love for sentient beings, and see these sentient beings as their finest teachers. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But so we heard this quote from that is found in the Jewel Ornament for Liberation, and is a quote from Asanga's Bodhisattva Bhumis. So we'll tell a little story about Asanga another time, once we get to the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So cause, general cause. Awakening the lineage of the great vehicle as a cause. So here, what does that mean? For example, the generation of great compassion that awakens that lineage of the great vehicle, those things which are, concordant with in the lineage of the Mahayana, that which makes you enter the Mahayana. So awakening that, waking that up, being taken care of by a spiritual friend, which is the cause. Here in this text, it's interesting. One says taking care of, this says being taken care of. We have to really look at the Tibetan. I translated this with someone else a while ago. So we'll have to check that. Because we're seeing a little bit of a different nuance, right? In Gampopa's, in the Bodhisattva Bhumi's translation. I don't have the root text and the agility to go through root text in Tibetan this quickly, but it's just a note to take. C, the cause which is under the influence of love and great compassion, and then this willingness to endure the hardship for others, which is a cause. So let's look at compassion a little bit. So we see it mentioned in Geshe Lobsang Gyatso's, the person who founded the dialectic school. We see him putting as an example the generation of great compassion under awakening the lineage of the great vehicle. And then we also see in C being under the influence of that. What is compassion, and how does it come about? There's different lineages for generating the mind that aspires to enlightenment. But one of the lineages for generating the mind that aspires to enlightenment shows the kind of that cause and effect relationship between various steps and the arisal of compassion, and then from an effect perspective, what compassion gives rise to. So we see these general causes that are being presented here. But again, in order for us to get to this place that will allow us in this kind of process to generate compassion, we have to get first to a place of equanimity. We have to get to a place that has an equal kind of desire, where we have an equal desire to be of benefit and of use to all the varieties of sentient beings, our friends, our enemies, and neutral folks to us. So in the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, it talks about this being the fertile ground from which to grow the latter realizations. And one of those realizations that grows from this ground is compassion, great compassion. And this great compassion, when we get to it, isn't a mind that says, oh, man, I really wish they weren't suffering. It's this mind that is so fiercely wishes that they didn't have suffering, wishes that every being, our friends, enemies, and neutrals, without any kind of bias, would be free from suffering. So let's talk a little bit about what it would take to even get to a mind that's under this influence of great compassion. What would it take? So without going through all of the steps of the Lamrim, we'll just, we'll start at equanimity. So, but as everyone knows, the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, and the teachings that are there on, relying on the teacher, hume of life, of leisure and opportunity, death and impermanence, and karma and its results and refuge. All of those things are necessary to understand. And then the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity. All of the teachings are necessary to understand in terms of the three highest higher trainings on ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And then we get to the teachings for beings of great capacity that begin with this generation of bodhicitta. But there's some pre-steps to the bodhicitta. So we'll talk about those tonight. And specifically, when we look at getting the mind that aspires to enlightenment, I'll jump ahead just slightly. When we get to specific causes, so we're in general causes right now. When we get to specific causes, we get into the various practices that lead one to the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So the first set of practices that are presented are those passed down from Maitreya to Asanga and Atisha, called the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And then the other lineage of practice we'd say would be passed down from Manjushri to Nagarjuna, and that profound view lineage to Shantideva, and that would be the equalizing and exchanging self with others practices. So tonight we're going to kind of focus, even though it's jumping ahead a little bit to the specifics, we are going to, in order to get to compassion, which is talking about one of the causes of this mind generation, we have to have some pre-steps. So I'm going to use the 7-point cause and effect passed down from Maitreya to Asanga and the pre-step of equanimity to guide us to compassion, just to kind of guide us in a way that we can understand how you would get to such a feeling or such a thought. And I don't mean in a guided meditation way, in a very, very clear, way that we could understand it from cause and effect. And then everyone can apply that to their minds and familiarize their minds with that at that point. So Lama Tsongkhapa says it's necessary to get to this place of equanimity. And Panchen Sonam Dragpa eventually says that equanimity isn't just this kind of impartial place. It's impartially willing to benefit. You aren't partial to those you're willing to help, is kind of the springboard, or your openness, if you will. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, but you aren't partial. Your openness isn't partial. So how would you come about such an idea? It seems easy when we think about, somebody that's neutral to us, because we already feel like it, right? But we are really like open, right, to help. So be careful with this word so you don't just land it neutral, because you're trying to change the way you react to these three types of beings. So you have this equal kind of care, if you will, or care is fine, without getting too technical. So you start with those that are neutral to you, because you don't have a reaction that takes place, but you don't have a reaction that's really open. So you get to a place where you just try to, warm up to neutral, but not warm up in a way that is attached, like you would be as soon as you think of a friend. But way, way away from what you think of when an enemy comes up, right? So it's somewhere in the middle that you get all of these beings to, that is an equal place of openness to them, equally would be willing to benefit, or equally open to them. So you think of your neutral, those beings that are neutral to you, those people who maybe you walk by and don't know who they are, or you think of those beings, and you start to try to get an idea of openness towards them. And then the work starts. The real work starts when you move to friends, and those of you are really your best friend, right? Your mother, the person you are closest to, you think of whoever that is in your life. You have a very, very quick reaction when you think of that person. You'll see that the reaction that you're having in your heart, that's happening, isn't the same you had that was happening when you thought of somebody that you don't even know. And you're going to notice that if you think of an enemy real quick, or think of somebody who rubs you the wrong way real quick, you just had a very different reaction to both of those other types. This neutral person that really don't have any reactions to one way or another. And then this friend or loved one that you're just suddenly, very invested in. And then this person you don't like, that you're the opposite of invested in, if divested is a word. It would be you are not, you have animosity. You almost want to harm them, see them harmed, versus you want to see them only protected and, because they're yours, right? So we're trying to get a more reasonable outlook, because of the understanding that we find from the Lam Rim, that our friends can change to enemies, and our enemies can change to our friends. When we look at the descent into the Lanka Sutra that I sent to everybody, and we look at the justification that Buddha made for vegetarianism, and we see that the Buddha said that this is, one of the reasons that cyclic existence keeps happening, because we're eating our mothers, we're eating our brothers and our sisters and our cousins and our loved ones and our wives and our husbands. So we think we have these very, very specific relationships with the people in our lives. But if we take that meditation in another direction, and we aren't even just looking at this life in the flux of relationships and friendships that have changed and so forth that we've had, if we look at what that sutra says, and then we apply logic, those that we, love and those that care for us, have been our enemies, have it says in this, the same text, have killed us many times, have chopped off our heads. Those that are closest to us have chopped off our heads, have killed us. In the sutras, it says that. So we have to understand that this, if beginningless lives are true, and if this consciousness is a kind of continuous consciousness, that I just keep labeling as mine with different minds, Jeff the ant, Jeff the God, Jeff the human, Jeff the hell being. Not Jeff, but that's the only name I can use right now. The I grasp at an I. It won't be Jeff, obviously. I want to make sure that's clear. But I'm going to grasp at an I that is a hell being, that, I have grasped at an I that was a hell being. I will grasp at an I and have grasped at an I that's hungry ghost, animal, human, now, demigod and God. I have all of those opportunities, and everyone else has all those opportunities. So the stability of relationship is clearly not there because of everyone's varying karmas. In every lifetime, there's a variety of experience because everyone has individual varieties of karmas. So we see when, Shariputra, sees the kind of show going on of someone eating a fish, and a dog comes up to steal the fish and he hits the dog, and he sees this play going on and he says, samsara is so strange, and he shows how these beings had these varying relationships before, where they would have never behaved the way they were behaving, and they were because of the absurdity of the varieties of karma and the way that karma manifests. And so we look at our loved ones in that way, and then we move on to our enemies in that way. And we see this instability. We see that we can't really, why do we label someone an enemy? What is the real reason? Do they have some inherent nature of an enemy, of a bad person? Does everyone think that that person is a bad person? Probably not. I mean, I used to hear this Lama say, like, even an axe murderer's mom says, but he was such a nice boy. I don't know what happened. He's such a nice boy, right? I don't know why that person was able to do those horrific things. So there isn't this inherent nature that everyone could see of enemy, of bad, of evil. And likewise, those people we're obsessed with that we love. Even the Dalai Lama people find distasteful, right? So we can see that there's not this certainty that we can kind of cling to when we look at friends, enemies, and neutrals. And when we start to really, really meditate on this and really get to a place where we can be more reasonable, it doesn't mean you don't love anyone anymore. We're talking about meditation here, and we're talking about growing it into a place where you can reasonably love folks and then reasonably love everyone. How you could really, love someone in a way that you would want to see them happy, really, really want to see them happy, and then understand that it's an impermanent situation that we're in. No matter what, we will have to be separated because of impermanence. We just saw that with Khenso Geshe Wandak, and now Chunglo Rata Rinpoche has passed as well. 2 huge Bodhisattva Aryas left this world back to back. And so, yes, so yeah, very, very sad that we've lost these great teachers. So anyway, that made me lose track a little bit, but we do these meditations so that we can grow our minds into something beautiful. We can become like Chunglo Rata Rinpoche. We can become like Khenso Geshe Wandak. We've seen these incredible actions that these beings engaged in, and the practices day and night that I watched Rinpoche do. And I just can't believe there's beings that really exist like the ones we read about. It really still blows my mind, even though there was one right in front of my face. When I look around this world, and I see all the tragedy and I see all the negativity, I have to always remember there's beings in this world, and there's more. Bodhisattvas just keep emanating, so it's not only the one that I knew. I mean, that would be absurd. There's beings in this world like Rinpoche and like Chunglo Rata Rinpoche right now, and we've met beings that were like that. So even though the world is the way that it is, there are beings like that just emanate pure love and pure light, that are here only to love us and only to help us. And they're still here with us. Even if they aren't in embodied form, they're here with us, trying to guide us in one way or another. And then there's plenty of other great teachers out there, amazing bodhisattvas teaching right now. The younger generation, there's incredible teachers also that are really maturing and really becoming the holders of that Dharma. So I just really rejoice in that. So it's that mind of equanimity that's really necessary, because as I heard somebody say, sentient beings annoy us. And if we want to equally help them and get to a point where we love all of them, we've got to get over that somehow. Like, we can talk all we want about bodhicitta and all of these advanced meditations, and I could give a talk about the channels, winds, and drops, but when it comes down to it, sentient beings can be really difficult to deal with. For me, I know, and I've tried to practice this stuff for a really long time. So for me, if I'm still kind of really have a hard time with sentient beings, I know that I don't have this equanimity. The mirror of the Dharma, I'm looking right at the truth. And if I'm having these really adverse reactions, trying to protect some people, trying to push some people away, and I don't have equanimity. So then how am I going to see all beings as my mother, as my brother, as my sister, as Suma, running around here, this crazy dog, that Rinpoche loved so much. And he had so much patience with Suma. She would just sit and bark at him until he'd pet her, because he'd, scratch her with his stick. So a dog, dogs familiarize themselves with things too, and they become accustomed, to certain things. So Rinpoche set those wheels in motion, and, she would just sit there next to him and just wait for the next touch, or just wait for the next, oh, Sumo, okay. And she just loved him so much. And she still just goes and lays in that room at night, sometimes all alone, and just lays there. And I can't even get her to leave the room. And she was just so affected. As were all beings, by such a holy entity, just a holy being who would sit on the porch, who would sit out there and just bless all of the bugs and all of the frogs, and he'd water the garden, and he'd see the bees coming, and he'd be so happy that the bees could pollinate things, and he would just be out there in bliss, and you would think that he was in a Pure Land already, the way he would behave. And he'd be in the midst of so much suffering at times. And he would just have this smile and this glow about him. And I, on paper, know what was physically going on. And I knew what was going on with his body. And he never complained. He just always showed this love and compassion and care for everyone. When he found out that, Lori had cancer, it was like, that was the first thing he was reacting to, not all these conditions that he had. And we're thinking to ourselves, I remember Scott was standing there because he was helping with something. Lori got the phone call that had happened. And it was just like, I could tell that we were in a crisis with Rinpoche. And all he was thinking about was, oh man, someone else. And he wasn't even thinking about himself. He didn't even say, he was really, really having a hard time till the last moments. And he just emanated that love. He showed us that it's possible. He showed us that equanimity is possible. So how did Khenser Geshe Wanda get that heart that was so big? He did this stuff. It wasn't a magical recipe. He didn't have somebody sit in a room with him and, shake something and ring a bell, and do some stuff, and then got better. That is not what Khenser Geshe Wanda did. Day and night he studied this stuff and meditated on this stuff with his teachers, the greatest teachers of that time. Look them up: Ling Rinpoche, Trijung Rinpoche, Khenser Pema Jetsun, Shaku Gen Nima. Everyone I just mentioned with Dalai Lama's teachers. These are Rinpoche's root teachers. Rinpoche would talk about going to the salt baths with the Shaku Gen Nima, Dalai Lama's teacher, and he would go, and Rinpoche bragged because he said, yeah, we would go. I didn't even have to pay for the bus ticket. Gen Nima paid. Rinpoche would always tell these funny stories. Yeah, we didn't pay. We went to the salt baths. We had a nice place to stay. Again, Nima paid. It was so funny. And again, Nima was really, really strict and would scold the monks and would say, you know, he's the one who told Rinpoche, if you really want to understand emptiness, you know, Panchen Sonam Dragpa's texts are great. What you're studying is great, but look at Jayan Sheba's text. Jayan Sheba wrote these great expositions on the tenet systems. And, you know, he just kept pushing everybody. You know, he told another student, you know, Pabunka Rinpoche's, you know, Lamrim is incredible. But once you get to the wisdom section, you've got to go deeper because this will never happen. You know, again, Nima said that, you know, and it's just never being satisfied with partial instructions. And that's how you get equanimity. You aren't satisfied with a partial instruction on how to get it. You dig as deep as you can to find out how to get it. And once you find it, you familiarize yourself with it over and over again until you realize it step by step by step, just like our teachers did. And it happens, it's real. It's not something that, oh, you know, maybe it'll happen 20 lifetimes from now because we heard there's someone in a Pure Land doing it. No, we're watching beings who have these realizations in front of us. Rinpoche acknowledged that he was a bodhisattva at the end of his life. It means that he had all of these things. How did he get them? This way. So then we get to this place where we're open to everyone. You know, we're not really thinking of what we're doing about it at this point. That's what's coming next. You know, we're not positing anything about these beings we're open to. We're just open. We're willing. We're willing to help them. And then we start to analyze so carefully. Well, who are these beings that we're talking about? How could I build up my feeling and relationship with them? Well, I start to analyze cyclic existence and start to understand that they've all been my mother. They've all been my father. They've all been my sister, my brother. They've all had these relationships with me. They've been the kindest beings I could ever imagine to me. So we begin to think of that, and we think about the fact that because of beginningless lives, mathematically, it is said that sentient beings have all been in a relationship in relationships like those with us. Varying texts say different things. Some say definitively they've all been our mother. Some say, you know, they've all been our kin. So regardless, they've all been extremely kind to us. So we start to remember how they've been kind. And we focus on, in this particular meditation, our mothers, but then we can think of how others have been kind to us. We remember that our mother carried, no matter what carried us in a womb, we're here, we came out, you know, we have our faculties, and we met with the Dharma because that happened. If that's the last thing, right? You know, that happened, and we're experiencing the Dharma because our mothers were willing to undergo pain, you know, for a period of time, and think about everything they had to do for that period of time. Are we willing to be that vigilant and endure that much suffering for 9 months for the Dharma? Our mother did it for us. I mean, what would we be willing to endure that much suffering for? So we think about how kind that is. We think about someone else willing to do that for us when we wouldn't even be willing to do something good for us for that long, probably, but they're willing to, it's not even for them. They're doing it for us. That's a pretty kind gesture when we think about that. So that's how we can relate. And then we think about how our mothers then gave us milk. We would be, you know, if we didn't have somebody at that stage nursing us, we would not be here. There's just no way. If we weren't being given formula or being nursed at that point, we'd be dead. You know, it's very easy for a baby to die, just drop it or something. I don't know. I'm really terrified of babies, so I'm a bad person to talk about it, but they seem extremely fragile, right? And they need someone to care for them. And then through the stages of life, we look at what mothers have done for us. And we think of all the kindness others have done also. And we're starting to really build up this kind of connection to sentient beings when we think like this, because we were open to them. Now we see we've had these relationships with them. And just because, we've forgotten our past life, we've forgotten a lot of things in this life. Does that mean they didn't happen? If someone was kind to us when we were 3 and we forgot, does that mean that they weren't kind? No, we just forgot. So we just take that we forgot when we were 3 person who was kind to us, and we stretch it to the only logical place, which is this beginningless relationships and beginningless kindnesses that occurred. There's just no way it can be anything different. When we look at consciousness, consciousness can only be caused by a previous moment of consciousness. We can't find a beginning to that. But we do find a beginning to this life. So there has to be something before that. And Dharmakirti was very clear that this consciousness has to come from a similar class, not from a discordant class, not from something that's not concordant with it. Has to come from consciousness. Non-consciousness, matter can't cause consciousness. Consciousness has to come from consciousness. And consciousness isn't measurable. They're looking for it, always looking for it. But Buddhism says it's something that isn't as findable. It's not matter. It's not particulates. It's particles put together. It's something that is clear and knows things. And that's how it's defined. So you start to think of this kindness that everyone's shown, and then think, well, I owe these beings. I would love to repay this kindness they've done for us. I would love to repay that. Then now you've gotten to a point where having kind of a love for them would be realistic for everyone. By the time we get here, we're talking about everyone, So when we go through these meditations of recognizing sentient beings as our mothers, we go through, we think of our friends, and then our neutrals, and then our enemies, right? We make sure that we're solid on these things as we're going through, and making sure as we go through, we're solid on these, because by the time we're getting to love, we really, really know firmly that it's all sentient beings that we're thinking about repaying the kindness of. We know that we can't even count the number of them that they are based on what the Buddha said. It's that many, and we're ready. We're ready to want them to have happiness and the causes of happiness, and say how nice it would be if they had that. And I want to do something about it. I want to do something about it. But that thought of love, I want them to be happy, I want everyone to be happy, is coming from because they were kind to me, right? We're attracted. We have this love through the force of attraction, it's called. It's like a magnet to them because they were so kind. We want them to be happy. The next step of compassion is a different type of analysis that's going to take place. This type of analysis is about suffering. So we want sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. We have to think about suffering and understand what that is. And then we go into a deep analysis of the Four Noble Truths, right? And we look at our own sufferings. We look at the various sufferings that we have to endure and the causes and so forth, the potential for cessation and the pathways that would lead to that. We have to arrive at that place where we are positing what suffering is, the 8 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, the 3 types of suffering, and then kind of relating our own experiences to them, not just listing names, thinking of our own experience. We had to be separated from things that we found pleasant. We had to meet with so many things we didn't find pleasant. We don't always get what we want. We had to be born. We don't remember that, but that doesn't look fun. We had to age. I know that's not fun. We have to get sick. We know that's not fun. And we just experienced, or we have many times, for those of you working in hospice, death. We've died many times, but not this time yet. Right? We're very good at dying. We've done it since beginningless time. It's not a new thing for us. We've forgotten it, and it terrifies us because of our grasping itself. It's always there. And when that moment that you think that there's a real kind of system pattern interrupt about to happen, that grasping comes in heavy. And if you aren't practiced and well-versed in the Dharma, it's a very, very difficult place to be. So I just encourage everyone to get to that place that I saw Rinpoche at. Just totally, totally fine. Yeah, do that. Yeah, do that. Yes, I want that because of this. No problem. See you later. I mean, really, no disruption of practice. You know, as soon as he said to me he was going to pass, he just went into this, pretending he had bells and dorjes and just went into practice. He wasn't interrupted by the thought that, oh, I won't have this I anymore. So how do we get there? We do what I'm talking about. We meditate on our own suffering. And then we meditate on others' suffering, and we start to try to figure out how nice it would be if they were free from suffering and the causes of suffering, right? We thought about our suffering, and we know how vast and deep it is. We've thought about all these different relationships we have with everyone. We want to equally help them. We're open. We know they've been our friends and our mothers and so forth. We want to repay their kindness. We want them to be happy. And then we get to this place, how nice it would be if they were free from suffering. And we know what suffering is clearly that we want them to be free from. And it's everyone we want them to be free. And we want to do something about it. We're open at equanimity. Now we're open to doing something about it. We're open to, doing something about, bringing beings to happiness free from suffering. And then the next thing we do in this 7-point cause and effect, now we're starting, these things we talked about were the causes of compassion, right? Great compassion. Now, great compassion causes two things to happen. You say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take it on myself to bring sentient beings who are, I can't count, to a state of happiness that's free from suffering. I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it myself, no matter what it takes. And then the light bulb goes on that you can't, and you have to become a Buddha. And at that point, if they say, if you have fiercely meditated on this, and you have created those causes and conditions to the utmost level, and you've realized each of those steps, that light bulb has mind generation happen, has bodhicitta occur. But it only occurs from those causes. And then there's the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice that we'll get into later. But I wanted to talk about compassion a little bit because compassion, in the Madhyamika Avatara is bowed down to. Chandrakirti bows down to compassion. He says it's important in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And we have to, understand the significance of it. But also it's easy to say. Compassion is a very easy word to say. It's very easy to have for people who aren't annoying to us, right? Who we don't find offensive. That's compassion is simple. It's very easy to have like a major thing happen and then you're like, want to throw yourself into, and you're like, I really do love all sentient beings. That's called sugar cane. It's sweet on the outside, but hollow. Has to be foundation, has to be realized through dependence on a correct sign. We're analyzing these things, and then we're realizing these things. We're getting to the point where we realize them incontrovertibly through a correct sign, and then we realize them. But the last thing that I wanted to end with, we didn't get very far, but it's fine. We're not trying to go far. We're just trying to learn Dharma and trying to change our lives, right? Week by week. So the last thing I want to say, I know it's 8:51, but that's okay. I can get through this kind of quickly. What I wanted to talk about, when we look at, trying to put all this into practice, the Lojong is beautiful, the mind training texts, in showing us how we combine our life with these things that we're talking about. The Lojong is allowing us not only to see, okay, friends, enemies, and neutrals, it's giving us a lot of tools to use when when people are annoying us, if you will, right? When we aren't as realized and advanced, it's giving us the advice and telling us what to do, how to train our mind, how to lojong, how to change it, how to train our mind, turn our mind, really is what it's saying. How do we turn it? So I just wanted to read a couple things before we end, because I think it's so important that we talk about establishing this in practice. So the 7-point cause and effect by Geshe Chakala, the Lojong text Rinpoche taught many times. When we get to the third section, depending on, it's done different ways. So in this particular translation, it's the third section. It says, when the container and its contents are filled with evil, change this adverse circumstance into the path to full awakening. Utilize every immediate circumstance for meditation. So what does that mean? It's saying when the contents and the container and its contents, when samsara and the beings in it, right, are filled with evil, when you're having adverse circumstances, transform them into the path. Take a step back and say, how do I develop equanimity? Because that's a good place to start, just a more reasonable place to start. And then you can say, in worldly terms, we have to realize if someone's conning us, we have to figure out if they're conning us, and then maybe stay away from being conned. Dalai Lama says we don't become stupid because we get compassion, but it's this openness that we have. And when we have this openness, and when we're practicing spirituality, it's amazing how many less people are irritating. Very, very interesting, correct? So the other points in Lojong that I wanted to read is that, it talks about in the 8 verses for training the mind by Geshe Longri Tamba, a very beautiful text I encourage everybody to read. It says, in all my actions, may I watch my mind, in the 3rd verse. And as soon as a disturbing emotion arises, may I, that would endanger myself or others, may I firmly face and avert it. May I forcefully stop it at once. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about making it so that our abandonment of our bad reaction or our sitting in our badness is quicker and quicker because of these teachings. We're more and more quick to turn it into a pathway instead of a pathway to Buddhahood or a pathway to the higher realms or nirvana than a pathway to hell, a hungry ghost, or an animal realm. In Arya Deva's 400 verses, beings are most familiar with the ignoble, therefore most ordinary beings go to the lower realms. So the more we familiarize ourselves with the opposite of the ignoble, the more we're creating the causes to not have that occur. And then we can achieve, high status and certain goodness, the high status that they're spoken of in Nagarjuna's text of the letter to a friend, high status of the higher realms and certain goodness of liberation and Buddhahood. And we talk about that same thing in terms of the 3 the beings of 3 capacities, small, medium, and great. So may I, as soon as my mind starts to get screwy, may I apply an antidote, is what it's saying. And the Buddha taught many antidotes. If you have anger, meditate on love. If you have attachment, meditate on impurity and reality of the body, ugliness of the body. If you have pride, meditate on impermanence, or meditate on the different divisions and classifications of karma you don't know. And that'll bring it down real quick. All the texts you don't know anything about. There's a lot of antidotes to a lot of problems. And if there's just something happening you don't understand, you have to understand that you are experiencing it because of your karma, and the person is under the influence of their karma, and they are not independent in that situation. They are not free to do as they would like, just like we aren't free to do as we would like, or we just do what was great right now only. We would never think anything bad again. Like, okay, from right now on, I'm going to think only good things, do only good things, not, grasp at things as being truly established. It's not real. We're under another influence that we don't have any control over until we do, right? So we have to start to harness that kind of like crazy monkey mind and crazy elephant that's like out of control, which is our mind. It's like, like the crashing through rooms, like a bull in a china shop, our mind, right? We have to kind of try to harness that bull in the china shop and, lasso it with the mind of single pointed concentration, calm abiding, and then unite it with special insight so that there's nothing to go crazy over. When I see ill-natured people overwhelmed by wrong deeds and pain, right? So they're not just when people are ill-natured, they're overwhelmed by pain. We have to understand that. When someone's acting out meanly, they're overwhelmed by pain. So it says when I see ill-natured people, so are they ill-natured? Are they bad people? Are they overwhelmed by wrong deeds and pain? Right? When I see them, I look at someone, I feel ill-natured like that. They're overwhelmed by wrong deeds and pain. May I cherish them as something rare, as though I found a treasure trove. Because we know that it's in dependence upon beings that we become enlightened. Our greatest enemies teach us patience, teach us equanimity, teach us how to love. We couldn't love, if we didn't have an enemy, there's no way we could learn how to have immeasurable love and know what its opposite was, right? We have that as a frame of reference. When someone out of envy does me wrong by insulting me and the like, may I accept defeat and offer victory to them. Very important. Sometimes you need to just walk away. You don't have to win every time. Sometimes the most compassionate thing to do is to not win. And then you win, because compassion is winning. And it's amazing. Even if someone whom I've helped and whom I've placed all my hopes does great wrongs by harming me, may I see them as an excellent spiritual guide. So even those people I had all my hopes in being so great to me and so wonderful, when they do me wrong, may I see them as Cancer Geshe Wandak level. May I see them as my Lama, teaching me about who I am in my reactions, teaching me about where I am on the path, how quickly I can abandon those things, teaching me the varieties of beings I'm going to have to work with as a bodhisattva, and how I'll have to be skillful to work with them, and how hard it's going to be, and willing to do it, as we just learned. It's going to be hard. You have to be willing to go through that hardship. Why are you willing? Because you love them. Because your mother was willing to do that for 9 months. Right? Connections, it's all one big connection. And if you don't understand them, there's no way you understand the Dharma in its fullest way. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I've seen those who know the Dharma and they go through all these materials and they figure it out. And now I'm starting to see it all just completely connect. And I understand it. So I should have read the first 3 verses, but because I'm going to read it. In brief, directly or indirectly, may I give all help and joy to my mothers, and may I take all their harm and pain secretly on myself. So secretly, the Lojong is about acting like a yogi inside, but just Joe Blow on the outside. That is the advice of it, it's here, it says it right here. Anyway, we're going to run out of time like 5 minutes ago. So it's just really, it's important that we recognize that we aren't, when we start practicing the Dharma, suddenly, here it is, change your attitude while remaining natural. So you're not supposed to like, oh, now I'm practicing the Dharma and I have love for, and getting into these weird postures and pulling your mala out as soon as you see someone around. Oh, here's some attention I can get. And, maybe I can talk to them about something. It's really, about, my ego. So we've got to really check that. Lori's boss was talking about, we check our boss's boss, we check our ego at the door. Well, we got to check our ego all the time in Buddhism. period, full stop, especially the door to the Mahayana, Bodhicitta, because we're getting rid of a cherishing attitude for everyone else. So that door, our ego, must be checked, if you will, because the self-cherishing attitude has to be checked if we want to become bodhisattvas. May none of this ever be sullied by the thoughts of the 8 worldly concern, and may I see all things as illusions and without attachment gain freedom from bondage. So I will end there. Let's see. Maybe we'll do the concluding prayers. Does anyone have any questions? It's only 9:02. I'm trying to keep with the time strictly. And, concluding prayers will take 2 minutes or 3 minutes. But I would hate to someone not to ask a question if they had one. But I think everything's been pretty self-explanatory this evening. And if anybody has any questions, you can just email me. And the Buddha Center at Gmail, I believe. If you just go on the www.buddhacenter.com, you can just get right in touch with us. And we check that regularly. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. It may take me a while to get back to you, but people will all agree that I do get back to folks if I'm able to and have those answers. So yeah, so let's do the concluding prayers. And I want to say thank you everyone again for coming and for allowing me to talk about the most important topic there is to talk about, how, we and all sentient beings can be free from suffering. How these horrible things that we see going on in the world are all a result of self-cherishing, all a result of people seeing enemies, right? All a result of not having this equanimity. It's just all a result of a distorted perception of reality that can only be changed a little bit at a time. And our reality is created collectively. So the kinder that we are, the kinder the whole universe is. So if we're a little kinder tomorrow, if, I don't know how many people are here, I can't count, but, 10 people, 12, however many people are here. If we're a little kinder tomorrow, the whole universe is a little kinder tomorrow. So what's that going to take to be kinder tomorrow? Who will I have to maybe, separate myself from in order to be kinder tomorrow? Because when we look at the afflictions, Rinpoche taught, the afflictions arise because A, we haven't gotten rid of them. So if we're angry, it's because we haven't gotten rid of anger. They arise because we haven't gotten far away enough to work on it from the thing that makes the affliction rise. We haven't gotten far enough away from the thing we're angry at to work on it. So it's just arising. And then because of those things, we have improper mental conduct and we think all distorted about that and the relationship of the thing. And we make it worse and worse and worse. And we become more and more and more angry at that object of observation. And that's meditation. It's the opposite of the kind that we should be doing, but it's what we normally do when we become angry. We get right in there. We don't want to separate. We start arguing, and then we go back for more the next day, right? Instead of just saying, I'm really sorry, I don't want it at this point in time, stepping back. Because in that gap between the arguing and when we're going back for more, what's our mind doing? Justifying it, putting that person in that box of enemy and making it sure that they are, and soliding it up and wrapping it with a bow of enemy, right? And we are only able to do that because we still have anger and we're too close to that thing that's making us so angry. I'm not a bodhisattva yet. So we can't put ourselves in positions that we think a bodhisattva should be able to handle and be patient with all the time. Like Geshe Lobsang Gyatso said, we can't, if we're, a fox, go lay with a lion just because we think we're one. We'll be harmed greatly. We can't put ourselves around things that are dangerous for our minds when we aren't advanced because we're not ready. It'll just make us have improper mental conduct and get madder and create more non-virtue. So we really have to do what the text says, do what Nagarjuna says. In the beginning, a bodhisattva, when they're highly realized, would give a sentient being their eye. Start giving vegetables instead. Ordinary beings should start with maybe giving a carrot, giving some broccoli to a sentient being. So let's just do what we can. We have to recognize where we're at on the path and give ourselves a break and be kind to ourselves. Make our environment kind. Make the conditions for our practice kind. Make sure that we have love in our lives and that the things that we surround us with are the things that we love. And I don't know anything more than that. So we'll end with the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayers. And thank you so much, all of you, for listening to Bodhicitta and for making my evening much better than it would have been had I not done this. So I really, really appreciate it and rejoice in all of you coming. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Sonam Dragpa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray that Khensur Geshe Wandak will meet with us in the future in whatever form the Dharmakaya sends, in order for us to learn more and more and more of the stages of the path until we're completely enlightened and can be in the same status as Khensur Geshe Wandak and be able to emanate Sambhogakaya and a Nirmanakaya for the sake of all sentient beings. Thank you so much again, everyone. I'm sorry I went a little over in time, 9 minutes, but not bad. Not bad at all. Rinpoche said Khensur Pema Jetson used to sit sometimes for 8 hours. He wouldn't even go and get up and go to the bathroom, and he'd just keep teaching. And they'd have such a hard time. They'd be like, how is he not getting up? And Lama Zopa Rinpoche is famous for that. Like 3 in the morning, the teaching's still going on. So you got off easy. Anyway, thank you, everyone. I appreciate you all. Have a great night.